How do you know that you've actually learned something? Obviously on my channel I give you guys a lot of tips, a lot of hints, a lot of tricks, a lot of processes, but how do you know that you've learned these things? This is a difficult question, and it's a question that we ask a lot in coaching. We've got a framework to help us make sure that someone is actually learning, and that's something called the competency matrix. So let's walk through these quadrants individually. The first quadrant is unconscious incompetence. What does that actually mean? It means that you're bad at something, but you don't even know you're bad at it. It's an unconscious incompetence. And that's okay. A lot of people are scared of this quadrant, or actually realizing that you are bad at a skill or a competency can be an interesting process and can require a lot of growth and a lot of self-analysis. But remember, it's your coach or your manager's job to let you know that you're bad at something. They should be spotting those unconscious incompetencies and making sure that you're aware of them along the way. This doesn't mean that the accountability and the responsibility lies with the manager. There's still stuff that you can do of listening to others or reading books or finding hints, finding tips to make you aware that you've been doing it wrong. But it's a really important quadrant because this is where the coaching starts, is when you first turn around and go, God, I was bad at that and I didn't even know I was bad at it. Quadrant 2 is conscious incompetence. I now know I'm bad at it. That's great. I'm aware that I've been doing something wrong. And that's okay as well, because this is actually, again, a really important part of the journey of saying, I was crap at something and I didn't know. Oh, wow, I'm crap at it. And now I know why I'm crap. The next quadrant is conscious competence. So now you know what the problem was, you know what good looks like, and you know when you're doing it right. And that's awesome, because that is where we're sitting there going, great, this is a skill that I have and I'm aware that I'm doing it right. Now, when you do that skill enough and when you execute on that competency well enough, eventually you stop thinking about whether you're doing it right or whether you're doing it wrong, and it becomes an unconscious competence, which is quadrant 4, which is the holy grail, which is exactly what we're aiming for. You're so good at this skill, you don't even think about it anymore. A really good analogy is driving. When you first step in a car when you're doing your lessons, you don't even know where to put your bum. You're like, God, where do I even sit? And then after a while, you pass your test. Then you pass your test and then you drive. And then you drive for years and years and years. And then you can drive in a car for 9 or 10 hours, arrive at your destination and not remember anything significant happening. Or alternatively, you don't even remember your performance while driving because it was so natural to you, you didn't even think about it anymore. That's because you've gone through the competency matrix. Now think about this. Here's a really good way of illustrating unconscious incompetence all the way through to unconscious competence. And that is this. How many fingers am I holding up? The answer is obvious, right? The answer is 5. Because you could not see these 2 fingers. Now here's the point. You didn't know you didn't know. So the assumption that there was 3 was just because you are unconsciously incompetent at it, right? Now that you know there might be something different or a different way of doing it, listen to what your mind says now. How many fingers am I holding up? It's probably guessing and saying, well, probably 5. Well, no, the answer's wrong. The answer is actually 6. But you now know where you were going wrong. And then you become consciously competent. So how many fingers am I holding up now? Now, the first thing you're saying in your mind is you've got others in your hand. So it's either going to be 2 or 3, which makes a total of 5 or 6. And you're exactly right. Now, lastly, this is unconscious competence. You don't even need to think about it anymore. Exactly right. There was more on my other hand. Because you're not even thinking about it because you're so used to doing that skill. And that's the important part. So, how can you expedite this process for yourself? Well, ask for advice, ask for coaching, constantly read, constantly learn about your craft, make sure that you're aware of these competencies. But there's a very, very dangerous space in this matrix, and that is conscious competence. This is actually, in many ways, the most vulnerable place to be, is when you know you're doing a skill well, particularly from a coach's point of view. Because when you're doing a skill really, really well, the coach often turns around to you and says, you did that well. And then you do it well again, and your manager or coach says, you did that well. And then you create an environment where you think you're only doing it well when someone tells you you're doing it well. Think about it like this. Imagine doing a 3-point turn in your car now, and then your driving instructor leans his head in the window and says, you did that really, really well every time you do it. When he doesn't do it that time, you think you're doing it wrong. So you never move into unconscious competence. You stay in conscious competence, or worse, you start going back into bad habits and then you move back into conscious incompetence. So as a coach or as a manager or even as yourself, if you're doing it well and you're conscious of it, forget about it. Just move on, because we want to move it into that unconscious competence. I hope this was useful. As always, remember to subscribe, share with anyone who may find this of value, leave a comment, and give these a go. Always try these tips and hints, because they may add a lot of value to your day-to-day workflow or whatever it is you're trying to achieve with your role. And as always, guys, happy selling.